Hello, this is a video about tariffs in Plait, how they work, how to set them up and so forth. So I've set up an empty organisation called Tariffs demo that has got absolutely nothing in it at the moment apart from me, a user, and one client and one care worker, and we're going to go through the process of getting a booking added for that care worker to visit that client and generating a cost and a charge and checking that that's what we want them to be. So the means of calculating the tariffs, the costs and the charges of a booking, depend on four things. Essentially, who is giving the care worker, and more precisely the grade of that care worker. But for convenience, we put those grades into grade groups, which sometimes is a saving, but more often than not is a one-to-one correspondence. So that's the first factor, is who is giving the care. The second factor is who is buying the care, which we call the contractors. All care is bought under a contract, whether it's a local authority contract, a framework, an individual self-funding their care. There is always some sort of contractual agreement about what the rate is going to be. The third thing is what sort of care is being provided, so whether it's personal care or domestic care or care at night, a sleeping night, that sort of thing. So we call that the event type, and they're grouped as well, and contracts are also grouped. And finally, the time of the care, which is both the time of day that the care is delivered, and also the day of the week, and whether that day is a bank holiday, and so forth. So three of those four sort of things that determine the tariffs are set up in this tab here on the organisation page, the tariff framework, and let's set them up. So we're going to do a very simple thing, the simplest possible. We're going to have a grade group called care worker, and we're going to have a single grade in that group, which is also going to be called care worker, and we're going to have a contract group called private, and we're going to have a contract within that group, which is also going to be called private. And then when we get to events, you'll see something slightly different. So the event type groups is on this same tab as everything else, but the event types themselves are set up on a separate form because they get a bit more complicated. So we'll navigate to that tab separately, but we'll just add a few event type groups, and the main one is going to be care. But just so that I can show you some other stuff, we'll put in some others that might be useful. So I'll put in annual leave, and we'll put in supervision, and just save that lot. And then we're going to go to the event type page. We don't have any event types yet, so I'm going to create some. I'm going to create an event type called care. Care has a client. We'll say it doesn't have multiple clients, although you could have like a husband and wife receiving care at the same time. It has a care worker. It's typical to have multiple care workers so that you can support double ups. And we're going to have a colour for our allocated care bookings. So I always make them green. I don't really have a good reason for that, but we're kind of sort of broadly following some sort of traffic lights, and an unallocated colour of red. And we're going to put that, surprise surprise, in the event type group of care. And then I'm just going to quickly whiz through the others. So I'll put annual leave, and annual leave has a care worker, and we assume that they're going to be available, and we'll just give that a colour as well, make that blue, and that goes in the annual leave group. And then finally we're going to have the supervision. So supervision is where a member of staff has a meeting with a care worker, and let's say that there's no multiples involved, and we'll choose some random colour, and let's have a dark on there to make that work properly, and we'll use something red again for unallocated, and that's supervision, and hopefully that's all going to be legible. Yep. Okay, so that's everything that we wanted to do on event types, and let's now go on to our tariffs tab, and we'll see that when we set up our new organisation, it inherits its tariffs from the parent. But now I've set up a tariff framework, I'm going to need to create a new tariff structure. So I'll click on this button to do that, and we get the most complicated form on the whole system. And it's complicated because it has to be, because everybody has different ways of doing this, and we need to support all of the ways that people do their charges and their costs. I've written actually 4 home care systems for home care providers, and this is slightly simpler than the third system that I wrote, which was staff plan. So there was one element of the tariffs in that we've dispensed with for a slight simplification, but you know, it is a complicated area of the system, and it is an important area of the system, because clearly if it doesn't work, you know, you're not bringing money into the business, or you're not paying people the right amount, and then they're going to walk. So I'm sorry that this is so complicated, but it has to be. So tariffs are effective from a date and time, and if you ever change your tariffs, which you're very likely to, sort of annually, you know, you're going to put them up with inflation or something, then you need to create a new tariff structure, and you would do that by clicking here, and there's actually an FAQ describing how to do that. Description, so we'll say it's the initial tariffs, but you know, if you create a new scheme next year, you would call it, you know, April 20 whatever it is tariffs, and you can pay on the planned delivery of care, or you can pay on what was actually delivered, and likewise you can charge on whichever of those you want. The system supports travel expenses, so you can tell the system what travel unit you use and how much you pay. Oops, so I'm going to pay 40p a mile, and I could have some grade overrides to that, so different grades could get paid different rates, which is useful when some grades are cheaped into your organisation. We also support expenses for cycling, and even expenses for walking, although I've not seen them used. There's 3 options for travelling from home to the first booking. The most common by far is none. So that's from the first booking, from home to the first booking, or from the last booking home. I don't think there's any legal obligation to pay that, but some people choose to. Okay, so now we get to the bit that is sort of seriously about tariffs rather than travel time and stuff. And we first of all have to deal with the element of the time that the care is provided. So what we do is we break up our, you know, all the times, all of the weekdays, the weekends, the bank holidays, the times of day, into the smallest number of things that influence the rates. So in a simple case that I'll use here, you could imagine that an organisation would pay, because we're in the pay side of things at the moment, although it's likely going to be the same for charge. We'll say that they pay a rate for normal hours, where normal hours start at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish at 6 o'clock at night, and then they pay a different rate for antisocial hours, which is before 8 o'clock in the morning, after 6 o'clock at night, and weekends and evenings and bank holidays. Okay, so we're going to have 2 tariff periods, and they're going to be called normal and enhanced. So let's just put those in. And then we have to tell the system what makes up these periods, which are normal and enhanced. So normal, we've decided, is anything from 8 o'clock on a weekday until 6 o'clock on that weekday. So that's pretty easy. So we say that on a weekday, starting at 8 o'clock, we've got this thing called normal. And on a weekday, starting at midnight, we've got this thing called enhanced. So from midnight, you're running at enhanced rate until you hit 8 o'clock when you're running at normal rate. And that's the case until 6 o'clock, when you're running at enhanced rate again. And then we're going to say that weekends, all day, both days, are enhanced. And we're going to say that bank holidays are also enhanced. Okay, and now we're going to start setting up what the rates are that we're going to pay people. So in our tariff demo organisation, we only have 2 pay rates. We have normal, and we normally pay people £8 an hour, and there's no unit element to that. And then there's the antisocial pay rate, the enhanced pay rate, and we're going to pay £11 an hour. Okay, so let's have a quick recap of what we've done for setting all this up. On our tariff framework, we've dealt with the who provides, what the contract is under which they provide, the type of care that is provided, and on tariffs, we've dealt with what the time of day is that the care is being provided. Okay, so now we've set up the elements that we're going to use to create the tariffs. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping before we go and set up the detail of the tariffs, because now we've got some event types, we can get rid of a couple of error messages that will be coming up at the moment. So if I go into the client who I set up prior to recording, we'll see that we get an error message when we come in. You need to set up a default event type on the organisation page. And if we click there, it'll take us to the organisation page. And you can see that there's this section here for what the default event types are on the client calendar, the staff calendar, and the carer calendar. So the type of the event that we're most likely to be drawing onto a client calendar is going to be the care event. And on the carer calendar, it's probably going to be annual leave. And on the staff one, it's going to be supervision. I mean, these are obviously just examples. But I just wanted to demonstrate that. And we could see now that if we go into the client form, we don't get that error message. So let's go back to the tariffs organisation and go to the tariffs tab and go back down into this grid where we actually set up the relationship between those 4 elements, those 4 variables that determine the tariffs, and the rates that come out. So you can see here that there's a little bit of help down here saying how to insert and delete rows from this grid, but actually the first click on an empty grid will create a row for us. So what we've got is about the simplest sort of combination you can possibly have. We've only got one thing that determines what the pay rate is, and that's whether it's enhanced or basic, and that's in the tariff period. So if we choose normal there, that's all we need to do. We can go and set the pay rate, but let's just talk about the scenarios that might apply that would use this, that would mean that we have to use these other columns. So it might be that you had a different rate of pay for domestic care compared with personal care. So you would have at least twice as many rows, one with all of the domestic and one with the personals. It may be that different grade groups, different grades therefore of care workers attracted different rates of pay. So you might give people a pay rise when they've been with you for 6 months, a year, whatever. And it might be that you pay people different amounts depending on the group that they're providing care to, although that's not very common, but it's there for completeness. I've seen it. Anyway, so we've got stuff that happens in our normal tariff period. We're going to pay the normal rate, and that's everything that we need to do for weekdays 8 till 6. But it may be that you've got some sort of wrinkles and that, and it may be that for short visits or long visits you vary that rate. So these last two columns enable you to do that. So we could see that it might be that you have a slightly lower hourly rate for long visits. So anything over 3 hours you pay £7.90 for, in which case you would put 180 in here, and it would only apply to bookings whose total length was longer than 3 hours. And it may also be that you pay a higher rate or a unit rate where bookings are shorter than a certain length of time. So half-hour bookings quite commonly attract a unit charge, which works out to be more than the hourly rate, or more than half the hourly rate. So you deal with that here, and in the case of a half-hour booking you'd put in 30 minutes, but we don't need any of that. All we need to do is put in our enhanced rate. So I did control insert there to get a new row, and we're dealing with the enhanced tariff period, and we're dealing with the enhanced rate. So that's the pay side of everything set up. So we could go and test that now if we wanted to. We could go and put in a booking for our client and send our carer there and check that our carer was getting paid. But we've got a couple of things to do before we do that, because our clients and our client and our carer don't yet have contracts or grades. So if I was to try and put something on Doreen's calendar for tomorrow, see, client Doreen requires a service contract to be specified for the event, so I need to do that first, and I do that in the financial tab, and I'm going to add a contract for Doreen, and this will be her self-funding contract, and all clients are able to be self-funded, so that option's always there. And if they are self-funded, you may have an account system that they've got a reference in, so that field above becomes visible. And they may have a reference. I mean, this is not at all typical with self-funding, but they might have a contract reference that they'd give you, much more typical in the case of local authority funded care. And the type of contract, we've only got one, it's private, and the contract starts today. It started at midnight today. Okay, so that's our client. So we could go back to her calendar and add a visit tomorrow, and it will let us put it on, but it won't let us assign it because we don't have a care worker to assign it to yet. So let's go and look at our care worker, Jenny Carer, and she's not got a grade yet, and in fact she's not in post yet, so I can't give her a grade, but I can put her in post because we don't have any requirements inhibiting that. And I'll add a contract, and this is her starter contract, her first contract, whatever, doesn't really matter. And the grade, we only have one, and she's also starting at midnight today. So if I save that and go back to, actually let's go to the home page, and we'll see that we've got an upcoming care event that's unallocated, as you'd expect. So I'll click on that, and that'll take us to the sort of the form view of the booking, and I can see who I can allocate it to. And it's saying I can't allocate it to anyone, and I remember why that is. That's because I have not yet given my care worker any availability. So I'll just go back and do that, and I'll hit A to put it into availability mode, and I'll draw on some availability, and I'll hold down the Alt key so that that is daily availability. Okay, and now I'll go back to where I was and go back to there, and I'll ask the system what carer can help me, and Jenny Carer can, surprisingly enough. So I'll select Jenny Carer, and now we've got a booking that's allocated. And on the event context menu here, we can now look at all details. So we've got a 1 hour booking, and if we look at care workers, we'll see that the cost of this care booking, so what we have to pay the care worker, is £8. And if we click on here, we can see how that £8 is made up, and it's made up as 60 minutes of normal rate. So if the booking were to go over the enhanced rate, the changeover between enhanced and normal, we would have 2 rows there, one for the part of it that falls in the enhanced rate, and that would be at £11 an hour, I think it was, and the other one, as you see, for the element that comes in the normal tariff band at £8 an hour. Okay, so we've got payments that we can make. Now we need to think about charging, and the good news is it is incredibly similar. So if we go back to the Tariffs tab on the organisation page, we'll see that we have these charging scales. I'm going to skip the minimum wage section for a minute. We've got a charging scale section, and the first question is, are time bands used for charging different from those used for payments? Okay, so our time bands used for payments are these ones here, the makeup of the tariff periods. And we'll say that in our case we change the charges at exactly the same times of day and types of day as we change the pay. So we're not going to check that box, which means that the only thing that we still need to tell the system is what our charging rate is. So if we say that normal rate is charged at £17 an hour with no unit element, and enhanced rate is charged at £21 with no unit element, and we'll save that, because I'm just going to show you what would happen if I had checked that box. We'd get these two field grids to set up our different tariff periods and tariff periods makeup that we use for charging compared with those that we use for paying, but I didn't want to do that, so I'm going to cancel that modification there. Okay, so now again we need to say what the 4 things are that determine how much we're going to charge, and once again 3 of them don't matter to us because we've only got one contract type, it's private. We've only got one grade group, it's care worker. We're charging out all our event types at the same, which is the care event, but we've got 2 tariff periods, and on the normal one we charge out our normal charge rate, which is £17 an hour, and on the enhanced one we charge the enhanced rate. And again we've got this thing where you can say this applies for bookings longer than or shorter than whatever. Okay, let's save that. Oh, and just to go back to the minimum wage section here, which has actually got some help, but really there's two parts to it. One determines what a split shift is. So I'm not an expert on the minimum wage legislation, but if somebody is out and available for work and going from job to job, then that's part of the time for which they need to be paid for the purposes of calculating whether they're getting the national living wage, national minimum wage. But if they have a break, then you can say, well, they were on a break then, if the break is longer than a certain amount. And a recent case in one of the courts determined that split shift threshold should certainly be no less than 60 minutes. So I think the ruling was that if somebody had a 15-minute break, it was of no value to them. But you could argue that if somebody had a 60-minute break, it would give them time to go home and put the washing on or do whatever. So I wouldn't expect that value ever to be less than 60 minutes. And then you can put in the minimum wage amounts here. And what you could do is use this wage top-up not just as a way of ensuring that you're compliant with the national minimum wage legislation, but you could use it to pay people by shifts, and you could set your pay rates to be 0 up here and just have this grid completely blank, and put the hourly amount that you agreed to pay people in here, and that would give you shift payment. Okay, so let's just save that. I'll get rid of this row, otherwise it's going to object because they're required fields. I'll save this and I'll go back to our booking, which is now allocated, so I need to go there through the customer. Okay, so we're in the client, we visit their calendar, here's the booking. We're going to edit with the tabbed screen, which gives us the full detail, including the clients, and so that we can see that Doreen client has to pay £17, and again we can click on this and we can see that that's made up of 60 minutes at the normal rate of £17 an hour. So that's it. That's how you set up tariffs and check that they're working properly in Plait. If you want to change your tariffs, there is actually an FAQ on the support site with some detail about that. Thanks for listening.